everyone. I am Jenny Parker with the NASC. Welcome to today's NASC Preferred Supplier webinar, KSM-66 Ashwagandha, the next blockbuster ingredient for pet wellness. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Keith Weingardt is an integrative veterinarian with over 2 decades of experience devoted to helping pets live healthier, happier lives through holistic and science-based care. His work beautifully blends modern veterinary medicine with time-tested natural approaches such as nutrition, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and nutraceutical interventions for dogs and cats. A graduate of Cornell University's College of Veterinary Medicine, where he earned his DVM with distinction, Dr. Weingardt built his career around a deep belief that true wellness in animals comes from balance between body, mind, and environment. His holistic training includes certifications in veterinary acupuncture, animal chiropractic, and traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. Dr. Weingardt is an active member of the AVMA, the AHVMA, the American Academy of Veterinary Acupuncture, and the American Association of Traditional Chinese Veterinary Medicine. He teaches at Oregon State University's College of Veterinary Medicine and offers continuing education programs on topics such as longevity medicine and the role of adaptogens like ashwagandha in pet health. Driven by compassion, curiosity, and a genuine love for animals, Dr. Weingardt continues to inspire pet owners and veterinary professionals alike with his integrative approach to lifelong wellness. And with that, I will turn this over to Dr. Weingardt. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here with you today. Before I get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to all the folks at the NASC, especially, I've known Bill Bookout for over 20-something years, even before NASC became a thing. And the work that you guys are doing towards helping us in regards to regulatory status, understanding, labeling, compliance, all that type of stuff. And in addition, the hosting these types of webinars, so we have the opportunity to all learn from each other, is just such a great opportunity, and I'm really appreciative of this time to share with you guys. So as Jenny mentioned, we're going to dig into KSM-66 Ashwagandha, and to get started today, we'll kind of have we'll go through our little bit of an agenda. So I'm going to introduce a little bit about who I am and how I got here. And this is the first part of a 2-webinar series. So this is going to kind of dig into more the nuts and bolts of the producers of KSM-66 Ashwagandha, Ixoreal Biomed, as well as a lot of the things that go into that production. And then next month, we're going to dig into more of the clinical studies around the use of ashwagandha in pet health for dogs, cats, and horses. And we'll also look into some of the mechanisms of actions of the herb, how that can be utilized in understanding how to formulate with the herb as well. So stay tuned. So today we're going to get through, and I'd like to take some time to introduce KSM-66 Ashwagandha as well as Ixoreal Biomed. We're going to dig into some of the market trends, because I think when we really look at how things are out in the marketplace, it can kind of help inform our decisions about utilizing certain ingredients and how they can have their place in that experience. We're going to look into supply chain and traceability. I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle for Ixoreal Biomed. We're going to also look at what really sets KSM-66 apart from many of the other generic extracts and other branded ashwagandha products that are on the market. And in doing that, we're going to highlight some of the quality certifications and supply chain reliability, which I think goes a long way towards helping Ixoreal Biomed and KSM-66 really set the standard for the production of this type of extract on the market. And then we'll also do a little bit of a preview into the expanding role that this has in animal wellness. And as I mentioned, next month, we're going to kind of dig into it even further. So if we're piquing your interest today, stay tuned. We'll be back next month to talk about it a little bit more. So who am I? How did I get here? So I've been a clinical veterinarian for over 26 years, I think, at this time. I was one of those people who was really lucky. From the time I could pronounce the word, I knew what I was going to do. So my path has been set from a very, very early age. When I got out of veterinary school, I went into emergency and critical care, worked in the ICU, and suffered by trial by fire for about 5 years and learned a tremendous amount, and got really clinically savvy in a lot of different things. But during that time, I also started to see a lot of the limitations of what conventional care had to offer. And when my own dog became ill, it opened up a huge array of other opportunities to help expand helping my dog Max, but also open my heart and mind to possibilities. And that started really a quest for lifelong learning that continues to this day. So I started adding lots of integrative certifications, cut my teeth initially in acupuncture, herbal medicine, specifically Chinese herbs, but then really expanded into Western herbalism, and also have a real solid foundation in utilizing whole food nutrition in supporting our pet health. Now, throughout it all, over the last 20 something years, one of the things I've done is really intensively study nutritional supplementation and how judicious, targeted nutritional supplementation can be really pivotal in helping animals with chronic disease states. And over the last 5 years, I've been working with an animal health supplement company here in the United States in formulation, research, and development, and also education. And I talk with a lot of veterinarians, I talk with a lot of pet owners, and just trying to put the good word out there and how we can additionally help support our pets, in the space of nutritional supplementation as well. So my initial introduction to ashwagandha was a few decades ago when I was studying David Winston's book on adaptogens, and ashwagandha was prominently displayed in that book, and I started dabbling with it and started utilizing it in care for my patients. And I started to really see where it shined, where I was initially using it for treating endocrine disorders. I started to really see the herb shine in my elderly patients, those with cognitive dysfunction, those who are having challenges around stress, agitation, stuff like that, and also promotion of just general sense of well-being. And then when I became involved with the animal supplement industry, I went to my first NASC conference, which is one of them was sponsored by KSM-66, and I got really turned on to what they had to offer. And then in my process of working through education and helping, putting out continuing education materials for veterinarians to achieve their continuing education credits, I was given the opportunity to help present a continuing education webinar on the clinical studies behind the use of ashwagandha in pets. And that's continued to evolve into this opportunity to be here today with you to talk about Ixoreal Biomed and the KSM-66 Ashwagandha. So who is Ixoreal Biomed? So they are the manufacturer of KSM-66 Ashwagandha, and this is their headquarters here in India. And they are a vertically integrated manufacturer. Okay, so they from seed to extract, every piece of that puzzle is under the control of this company. And over 14 years of R&D, research and development, they have developed the world's most clinically studied ashwagandha. And that work that they've done towards research and development has really allowed for producing a product that has the most desired and optimum levels of the therapeutic constituents, the withanolides, to be present in this end product and the end extract. They have over 1,600 acres of organic cultivation in India, and then lots and lots of certifications. So we're going to dip into this a little bit later because, it feels like if there's a certification that Ixoreal has achieved it. So beyond just the management certifications, looking at food safety certifications, looking at the banned substances control group certifications, and then in terms of energy efficiency and sustainability, their LEED Gold facilities. So really just kind of, I think, setting a standard for manufacturing for us to look at. Now, if you're like me, you'd be like, well, what is KSM-66? I always wondered what that means. So I got to asking the folks over at Ixoreal Biomed, and there's a really kind of a cool story behind it. And it turns out that KSM stands for the Organic Farm Region in India, Kota Satakari Mandal. And the 66 refers to the number of iterations of research and development that it took to perfect the proprietary full spectrum root-only extraction process. Okay, so it's kind of like even though it's just some letters and a number, it's grounded in the dedication that this company had towards putting together a product and a process that they could be really proud of, that is accomplishing what they wanted it to, and they're also connected to the land, connected to the farms, connected to the region that is producing this herb. And I think it's just a really kind of a cool story as a backdrop for where that name came from. So as some of us know, ashwagandha ashwagandha is the flagship herb of Ayurvedic medicine. It's been used for thousands of years. It's considered a rasayana, okay? And in Ayurvedic medicine, a rasayana is either principle or a therapeutic that provides for rejuvenation, for longevity, for healthy aging, for vitality. And it does so in a way that's gentle and balanced. And it's very similar, kind of, if you think about it, when we talk about adaptogens in Western herbalism, this really fits that bill. So one of the things that's really important, we're going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but essentially one that's really, really important is that KSM-66 ashwagandha is extracted solely from the Withania somnifera root. Okay, the root only extract, not the leaf. And we'll touch base on why that's so important down the line. But this process that they did of those 66 iterations to create this process allows for a production of a root only extract that maintains that natural balance of ethanolides and other bioactives. So truly a full spectrum extract. And as an herbalist, I think it's important that we honor that and respect that, because I think the plant in its form, when we can get that full spectrum of all the different compounds that are in the plant, that's really honoring what that plant can bring as a therapeutic. Now, there's times where we're going to have potential therapeutic constituents that we extract because there's no way to get enough of those constituents in a bioavailable form to have enough of a therapeutic effect. So, but in those situations, it's like we have to consider that as an alternative. But I think if we can always go back to what originally worked in the plant, that's going to go a long way towards establishing a baseline. So, another really interesting thing that we're going to dig into is that they use a green chemistry process in the production of these extracts. So there's no alcohols or solvents that are used. And another really compelling point is that they got the clinical backing. So there's these controlled scientific studies, peer-reviewed, over 50 plus published clinical studies, with many including those done in dogs, cats, and horses that we're going to touch base on next month. So we're going to dig into a little bit of looking at the SPINS data, look at the market momentum. And when we look at this data, according to SPINS, adaptogens, this is the class of herbs that includes ashwagandha, those adaptogen sales have grown greater than 20% year over year. Now, for a little refresher, adaptogens are a class of herbs which help the body deal with non-specific stress. They have a balancing effect. They also work towards homeostasis, regardless of the area of disturbance, bringing us back into a degree of balance. And the other thing that's really important is that adaptogens have proven to be safe when used in the long term. Now, we see this when you look at the market, there's a lot of adaptogens. There's just it's a real a burgeoning market. There's a lot of work being done to get those out there. And I think that when you look at of these adaptogens, ashwagandha is the leading adaptogen with 16.9% year-on-year growth. Okay, so really kind of setting the trend as a adaptogen that's made its way into the market, but it's really, even amongst the adaptogens, is leading year-on-year growth. And something that's really helpful for me, as a practitioner, I'm always in that animal health field, but I also pay really close attention to what's happening in the human wellness space, because I find that there's a lot of times where things start to gain traction in the human health field, and we start to see downstream effects of that making its way into the animal health field. Classic example is longevity medicine. Longevity medicine is exploding in the human health field, and we're starting to see that kind of same effect finding its way into animal and pet supplements. And what we're seeing are people are looking for clinically validated ingredients. They're looking for clean label ingredients. And I think what we're seeing is a trend towards discriminating. I have very, very discriminating clients. Some of the pet owners that I help care for, they're looking, they're consulting Dr. Google. They're putting their pet symptoms into ChatGPT. So they're really looking for ways to really kind of help their pets on a deeper level. So they're doing this homework. So we have to be aware that if they're doing that we have to be apprised of that as well too. So we see that premium branded extracts command a stronger retail value. Okay. And when we look at the market momentum, and I think this is something as maybe it's somewhat of a fallout from the pandemic period, is that there's been a rapid growth in adaptogens, because I think it was a very stressful time on the earth, and I think chronic stress underlies a lot of chronic disease states. And we see a lot of the negative impacts of chronic stress in our bodies and that of our pets as alterations in sleep, changes in our rhythms, and also effects on our immune system. So we see adaptogens, but specifically ashwagandha, is having rapid growth driven by stress, sleep, and holistic wellness demands. Okay, and ashwagandha has become among the top selling herbal supplements in the United States. And I think this is driven by a strong adoption by health conscious, lifestyle driven consumers. And when we look at these consumers, guess what? Many of them have pets, right? And they're going to take those same principles that they're applying to their own healthcare and their own investigation into nutritional supplementation or how to enhance their own health. They're going to be doing those same studies and looking at what their pets are taking. Okay, so there's been a consumer preference shift, and 75%, 3 out of 4 pet owners are going to research ingredients before purchase. With the advent of artificial intelligence, many people are coming to you that are already diagnosed with, they've already figured out what the problem is, and they already have a plan. So you're going to we want to have things that we can utilize that are going to have data backing them up. I work with a lot of veterinarians, okay, and I try to educate a lot of veterinarians. And something I hear all the time is, show me the studies, show me the evidence. And while I oftentimes want to remind them that a vast majority of the things that they do in conventional veterinary medicine in terms of pharmaceutical interactions don't have any controlled scientific studies to prove that they work. But that's besides the point, because when we use something like KSM-66 ashwagandha, we actually have the data backing it up. And clinically studied ingredients help strengthen those label claims, and it helps minimize some of the regulatory risk around it. And I think the studies help, they get your back. Okay, so that scientific validation protects the brand. It helps support them. And I think that's something that KSM-66 really brings to the ballgame for us. So when we look at the manufacturing, when we look at the big picture for Ixoreal Biomed, something that's so compelling is that they have complete vertical integration. So this is, their supply chain is fully controlled and vertically integrated. So from seed going into that soil, cultivating it, harvesting it, processing it, extracting and manufacturing, there's complete ownership over every step of the process. There's over 1,600 acres of certified organic farmland in Rajasthan, India. Okay, this is an example of the farmland, and I actually noticed when you look at this this picture here, right where this tree is in the middle of this field, this long line that you see right here, if you zoom in, those are all people picking the roots from the ground. So you just, or the organic farming, and it's root only. So you're actually having to extract the roots from the ground. So a pretty labor intensive process. Because of the vertical integration to the supply chain, they can also have an uninterrupted supply. So there's an 11-month raw material reserve that's maintained for uninterrupted supply. Okay, and with a lot of uncertainties around the world these days, it's nice to have that security. Okay, so there's direct oversight of every step of that process, allows for the assurance of transparency. Okay, so they can see where things may be going wrong. There's traceability, so you can find out what went wrong, when it went wrong. And then that also allows for there be batch to batch consistency in the product, which I think is a really, really important point. And then there's everything from the planting of the seeds to the cultivation of the roots to the harvesting of the roots, the processing. Everything is exclusively done in-house. There is no outsourcing of this. And that allows for full control of the whole process and full transparency and traceability, which I think is just really builds integrity. Okay. And it builds trust in this process because we know every step of the way that they're going to be taking care of it. That streamlining, that process also goes into the advanced proprietary extraction. Okay, so they're using an aqueous-based extraction system. Okay, and in doing so, it preserves the natural bioactive profile. Now, as Jenny mentioned in the introduction, I've studied a lot of traditional medical systems, and these systems have been around for thousands of years. And something that's really important is us listening to and honoring how these traditional medical systems have prepared these plants and prepared these herbs, because there's many thousands of years of trial and error of figuring out these processes of how to have the most beneficial effects from these plants is going to come from honoring the process of how they were originally processed. how they originally preserved. So what Ixoreal Biomed has done is taken that technology and applied it to the traditional practices. So they've developed and controlled this fully in-house. So we have the ability to have optimal potency, we have safety in the process, and stability in the products. So we can look to every single batch that we're going to see, we're going to have consistent full spectrum composition. And as a herbalist, we know that to bring that entourage effect, like having all of those other constituents in there, is going to be of benefit to the patient and the animals or the people that are taking them. So the production is aligned with good manufacturing processes and holding themselves to organic standards. I joke with the folks over at Ixoreal now, is it seems like if there's a certification, you got it, and it's kind of true. And when we look at that, that holds them to really high standards. And there's extensive third-party certifications, as I mentioned, for safety, the sustainability, and the clean label integrity. Okay, there's rigorous quality control at every stage. So whether or not that's looking at the soil, looking at cultivation, harvest, processing, as well as extraction. And here we have a picture of a happy farmer, and you can see like our bowl of root only right there, and working in the field. So it's a laborious process, but and I think when we have the ability to control every step of that process, it helps us understand that there's integrity behind it, and it gives us some confidence and trust in the process. So just a quick aside. So as I mentioned, this is going to be a topic for next month. But there has been a lot of work that Ixoreal Biomed and KSM-66 have done in doing clinically published studies using this root extract in dogs, cats, and horses. Okay, and what we see across species for a variety of different conditions, that there's benefit of ashwagandha. So we see it from things such as calming, stress, cognitive health, as well as healthy aging. And that's where I really see the ashwagandha shine, is in our elderly patients, in our animals who may be, like for example, animals who may be developing canine cognitive dysfunction, or we're just having the creakiness, the challenges associated with the aging process, where we just see better improvement in their general sense of well-being. Okay. And there's nothing more heartening than that, when you can actually help an older animal feel better in their body so that their quality of life is enhanced. It's the whole purpose of why we're all here to do this, is to make the quality of life of our patients better. And in the future webinar, we're going to actually dig into these research studies. I won't bore you guys. I won't get into all the little data and the minutia, but I want to get the conclusions to you. And I think it's also really helpful for us to understand how this plant works, so that we can understand the mechanism of action, so that we have at least a somewhat of a functional understanding of the way the herb works in the body, so that we can then help guide our formulation, how we can utilize this plant with other herbs to put together comprehensive and synergistic formulas that are going to really help our patient population. Now, KSM-66 ashwagandha is truly, truly a market leader. It is the best-selling ashwagandha extract globally. Now, it's used in over 4,500 finished products. That's a lot of products, over 60 different countries. Okay, if you look into the statistics and the SPINS data, this is just in 2025, 8 out of the 10 top growing ashwagandha brands use KSM-66 ashwagandha in their products. Okay, 80% are using KSM-66. It's recognized, and there's reason for it, okay? It's recognized as the gold standard for both efficacy and purity. And I'll take a few slides to kind of get into this a little bit, because this is really, really super important on multiple different levels. So when we're looking at root only versus leaf extracts, now when I was speaking to the CEO of Ixoreal Biomed, one of the things that he said is there's a real problem with adulteration in ashwagandha products. And in our discussion, it came clear that it seems that the adulteration is being done to try and boost withanolide levels. So remember, the active constituents in the plant that seem to do a lot of the therapeutic effects are called withanolides. Now, there's some of them that are potentially more toxic, and they're concentrated in the leaves. So by incorporating leaves into that product, we may be enhancing our withanolide levels, but at what risk? Okay, so beyond that, the safety piece of it, there's also an economic and a sustainability perspective. Now, the leaves are roughly 100 times cheaper than roots. Okay, so if we put more leaf in there, that's going to increase our supplier margin, but it reduces that farmer's earnings. right? It's going to limit the leaves that are available for composting, and that's going to threaten the long-term agricultural sustainability. So while we may be making a quicker buck, the downstream effects of those decisions are actually have a negative impact in the longer term. Now, as I as I'm kind of like getting a theme here, listen to what's been done over thousands of years. Okay, they did this certain way for a reason. Okay, the root extract has been what's used in traditional Ayurvedic practice for thousands of years for a reason. Okay, the leaves contain undesirable alkaloids and variable actives. Okay, there's less consistency. Okay, and the regulatory bodies, was the Ministry of Ayush in India, recognizes and favors root-derived formulations. And the leaves raise safety concerns. There's a similar kind of trend across the entire nightshade family of plants in terms of the alkaloids and stuff like that that can cause problems. And what we were seeing is if you pay attention to the news or your industry magazines and stuff like that, there's been some challenges around ashwagandha and liver toxicity. And what's been found is that these products that are creating the challenges are potentially utilizing leaves in that, which are then enhancing or increasing the levels of these undesirable alkaloids. And this is again kind of reinforcing that. So and we'll dig into a little bit of this more. I don't want to bore people with like kind of, with constituents and stuff like that, but I think it's important to understand at least some of it. So the leaves contain really high levels of a couple with analytes called withaferin A and withanone. All right. Now, it's important to note that these compounds aren't just purely toxic. They actually have therapeutic effects, but it's when they are in high levels that's creating what we're seeing in the liver toxicity and other challenges. Now, withaferin A is actually known as a cytotoxic compound. So it's being used to treat cancer. For that reason, it's cytotoxic. And when we're using a full spectrum extract that's coming from the root, there's going to be those compounds present in there, but in the levels that they're meant to be in a therapeutic way, rather than we're us adding those leaves to an extract to try and boost the levels of withanolides, but in so doing, creating a more risky extract. Okay, so I talked to Bill Bookout a lot over the years, and one of the things he always says is trust but verify, right? And this would be one of those situations. If you're using an extract product and they're claiming really high levels of withanolides, 10, 15%, that's almost too good to be true. So you should really dig in and see, are those withanolide levels, are they breaking it down as to what's in there? Are they measuring withaferin A? Because if the withaferin A level is really high as a component of that, that's going to be a more concern around toxicity. Okay. And the government in India has actually issued an advisory against consuming the ashwagandha leaves. And we're seeing this kind of trickle down into other markets, like in the European markets, where in Poland and Hungary, you're legally allowed to only use the root in the supplements. And this is on the right-hand side. It's a little bit covered up by the pictures here, but this is the advisory that was sent out by the Ministry of Ayush in terms of warning people around the utilization of the leaves in the extracts. And this kind of brings it all home, because if you're looking at the pharmacopoeia standards, like Ayurvedic Pharmacopoeia of India, the USP, BP, IP, and World Health Organization, Monograph, all recognize and recommend only the root. Okay, so if we leave today's webinar with one thing, is remember, use only a root-only extract. And of course, KSM-66 that's what they're doing. And even the leaves are not even included in any pharmacopoeia monograph. So the vast majority of the clinical trials are being conducted on the root. And that's what's been used for thousands of years. And I think we should honor that tradition. Even in fact, 426 of 427 registered studies are use only root-based formulations. So I think what we can see is that Ixoreal Biomed and KSM-66 Ashwagandha are really setting that benchmark for quality, kind of setting the standard. So when you have that vertically integrated supply chain, you have traceability and control. You can, and we're backing it up. Okay, there's documented safety and efficacy across 50 plus studies, including animal health studies, and there's consistency. Okay, we have verification of the withanolide levels in every batch. And there's exceptional palatability profile for pet applications, which is hugely important for us in the formulation realm, because if you can have a great herb that does all these wonderful things, but if the animals won't eat it, guess what? It's not going to make any difference in the big picture. So we have to have something that they can take into their bodies in a form that's going to be palatable and safe and efficacious. And I do quite a bit of sourcing, and I'm always looking at suppliers, and I always think of like what criterion are in my mind that I want to make sure a supplier is going to meet for them to meet the standards that I have to be incorporated into a product that I may be formulating. So when we look at this, like Ixoreal checks the boxes strongly. We have the clinical substantiation and peer review data. Okay, how many ingredients on the market have that? It's compelling that they do. And there's this standardization. There's consistency within the batches. Okay. There's third-party testing and traceability, certifications. You name it, they got it. So there's the organic, non-GMO, all the ISOs, banned substance control group, which I think is important with our equine practitioners or people formulating equine. Where and we'll talk about this in the study webinar next month. But I think that this has a real strong space in the equine health field in terms of performance. And you can use that and it's not testing as a banned substance as well. So, it has its way to help, on multiple different levels across species. And then the other thing I find compelling is that the techno support. They're there for you. They have your back, and there's the reliability of the supply. Remember that 11-month buffer. Okay, there's a reserve there. So there's always going to be that if there's, if things happen in this world, as we know. So it's nice to have that reliability. And as I mentioned earlier, I think when a traditional medical system has done something a certain way for thousands of years, it's kind of important to honor that because it's been done that way for a reason. So when we look at the green chemistry process that goes into the production of KSM-66 ashwagandha, it's using this traditional method of preparation called Shirpaka. Okay. And what that does is it uses water and milk-based extractions, no alcohol or other solvents are used. And this traditional method of preparation enhances the bioavailability, meaning it's going to be taken up by the body and utilized better, and the potency of the extract. Now, I think it's brilliant because if you think about it, they've used what's traditionally worked over thousands of years, and then they've improved upon it, okay, to allow for the consistency and across the batches, okay, to be able to and to have the highest levels of withanolides. So they've taken something traditionally that's been so helpful and then fine-tuned it even further. All right. And this process preserves the full spectrum of the plant by ensuring that the hydrophilic and lipophilic components of the root are present. And it also helps because we're not using solvents like alcohol and other things. That's going to reduce the environmental impact. Okay. And that's going to reduce the risk that there's residue of these solvents in the end product extract or the end extract product. Okay. Organoleptic superiority. I love this. It's a great word. It's like an SAT word, but it's basically just saying that it tastes and smells okay. Okay, it's going to be palatable. And I find this to be very, very true. And that's why I love formulating with this because it has a very mild and neutral taste. So it makes palatability much better. So when you can get a cat to take something, you're doing pretty good. And I have colleagues who work for other supplement companies who are using KSM-66 ashwagandha in feline products and with good success. So I think it has its place to really help across species. And because of the lack of the bitterness to the root-only extract that KSM-66 ashwagandha brings, there's going to be allow for a higher inclusion level. So we can bring in more of that ashwagandha and have more potential for achieving kind of like that therapeutic effect without having the negative consequences on palatability and then, of course, the patient or the pet's compliance in taking it. So when we see extracts that may be more bitter, buyer beware because there's a potential that they're actually incorporating more leaves. Okay, the witherferin A that's present in the leaves is what brings that bitterness. It's one of those alkaloids that brings that that bitterness taste to it. And when they're adding these leaves in there to boost the levels of withanolides, we may be inadvertently creating this bitter end product too. And by using other extraction methods, so when we're using alcohol or other solvents, that has also been found to negatively impact the organoleptic profile. Okay, so that's going to help increase the bitterness of the extract too. So I think this is one of the real things that separates a KSM-66 ashwagandha from some of the other generic ashwagandha extracts you'll see. And I recommend, I'm a firm believer in tasting things. I joke with my clients all the time, like if I'm going to prescribe anything for my patients, I taste it first. Sounds crazy, but if I'm going to be repulsed by it, I can guarantee you that cat in the waiting room is going to be too. So it's really important to get a sense of these things. So if you're doing formulation, you're trying to decide on a product or a supplier, maybe get a few of those samples and then taste them. Okay, or try them out on your pet population that you're working with. Do some clinical trials with them where you can see how they're received. What's the palatability? What's the compliance? What's the owner feedback? What's that pet owner giving you that feedback around how that herb worked in the pet population? So I think when you have something that we can rely on that's not going to cause challenges around bitterness, and we have enhancement of palatability, to me as a formulator, especially with the spectrum of activity of the herb, it's almost like a no-brainer. Along with all the quality certifications and stuff like that, Ixoreal does rigorous testing on the product. So there's multi-stage of this. So we're actually testing not just for the active constituents, the withanolides, of course, their microbiological testing, heavy metal toxicity testing, as well as looking at pesticides, residual solvents, all that kind of stuff. And then there's all this is done in-house. So we have that internal quality assurance and the laboratories that are checking that there, but then also the third-party verification. And then, of course, they're going to provide a certificate of analysis with every lot that's produced. So you really just have that trust, okay, that there's integrity behind it, and you can have confidence that there's going to be consistency in it. As I mentioned, I joke around with the folks over at Ixoreal is that if there's a certification, they got it, we shrink them all down and put them on here, but you can see right there prominently displayed the NASC preferred supplier, but they're going through all the hoops, right? Lots of hoops, which are not easy to do as folks like in the NASC realm. I think we see how hard it is to kind of stay up with this level of compliance and jumping through all the hoops and maintaining our level of certification. And when you're doing it on this level, it really shows a dedication to the process and really putting in the effort to make sure that we're applying those principles across the whole entire business. So we have USDA organic certification, non-GMO project verified, kosher and halal certified. And then I mentioned earlier, like the banned substance control group, drug free, the ISO certifications. So you have your management certifications as well as the food safety certifications. And then we get the LEED Gold sustainable facility. So we have our energy efficiency, which goes to me is compelling because they're setting themselves up for being successful in the long term. Okay, because we have to keep an eye on that. How are we going to sustain this process? How are we going to make sure that there's always going to be ashwagandha root extract that we can have for generations to come? And I think that Ixoreal Biomed is doing that work. Again, just take a look at these. I mean, a lot of them clean label too. Just a really compelling argument that they're really doing the work to make sure that they're putting out a product and doing that the company is being run the way it should be run to be able to achieve these certifications. I also look at there's a lot of flexibility. Okay, so the powder can come in multiple mesh sizes for different powders and chews, and it's available in bulk. So you can get in 1 kilogram size. It actually goes into a multi-ton type of scale. So like you have flexibility depending on your needs, and there's going to be the support, right? And what I have found is that Ixoreal is there for you. There's the technical support is included with certificate of analysis, MSDS, and then the other thing is because there's a stable supply from its own manufacturing units, we ensure a fresh batch for each order. Okay, but there's also that reliability because they have that reserve. So you just kind of have your needs are going to be met. So we also are looking at kind of like the technical support and partnerships because this is, as I mentioned, what I found in working with these folks is that they're very available, okay, very approachable, and it's a family-run business, which is and I think that's you can feel that when you're working with them. There's the R&D team assists with dosage and palatability optimization. They're very smart people who've been doing this for a long time, and they have a lot to bring to the table. They'll consult with you around formulations specifically for pet delivery forms. And then, like I said, they've got your back. So with the science and regulatory data, but also the marketing support behind it. So again, when you have the peer-reviewed clinical studies to back it up, it goes a long way towards giving you that support that you need. But like I mentioned, they're going to be there for you. And I alluded to this earlier. So I just think that's really important that there's a commitment to sustainability. How are we going to ensure that this particular product can be produced for generations to come, and do so in a way that's honoring the land that it's coming from and the people that are working the land. And this is something that I am very impressed by in terms of the environmental responsible farming and processing that goes into it, the fair labor and community programs that are behind it, that you're going to see in a second here. Excuse me. And then also the LEED Gold certified energy efficiency. So really just a sustainability commitment. And I think that goes a long way towards, again, about the integrity of the company. So when you look at it, I kind of was joking. I say, well, you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. And when you look at what they're really doing, this commitment is giving back to the community. The folks who are out there, who are some of their workers and their farmers and the communities around that, they're supporting them. Okay, so there's millions invested in community development, and millions invested. Okay, scholarships for students annually, 1,600 plus, free support for 2,000 plus underprivileged children. So we're giving back to the children. Okay, making sure for generations to come, we're going to be able to continue to help support these folks. Free primary health care for 150 plus patients, and also thalassemia care for over 450 children. COVID vaccinations, as well as, well, something I found really, really intriguing too, is that 80% women in the workforce. 80% women in the workforce with wages that are 10 to 20% above the regional average. So really supporting these farmers, supporting the families, okay, that are behind the production of this herbal extract. And then dedicating, and because of they're in India, there's the dedicated care for thousands of abandoned and handicapped cattle. Okay, so really caring for the animals too. And then the support for specially able individuals through 40 plus centers offering education, training, as well as employment. So like I said, they're really walking the walk too. It's not just talking the talk. Okay, so really dedicated to the big picture. Um, so some of the key takeaways that I'd like you to really remember today, as I mentioned, root only is really important, okay? And we want a full spectrum extract that's going to have a little bit of all the different withanolides in there, but making sure that they're in enough of a concentration to make the therapeutic effect that we're looking for when we're prescribing these formulas in a formulation, okay? With extract in a formulation. So we're looking at this root-only full spectrum extract with a neutral taste, that organoleptic superiority, okay? Most clinically studied ashwagandha on the global market, hands down. And extensive quality certifications and batch testing is performed with a clean, sustainable, fully integrated supply chain. So for me, that just kind of checks so many boxes. And I think this is kind of like what I want you to all kind of like walk away today, is like these are the things that that are backing up this KSM-66 ashwagandha. So just a little bit of a looking ahead. So next month, we're going to get into how we can apply KSM-66 ashwagandha in clinical situations, especially around pet health. So some of the studies we're going to dig into look at calming support and stress management, cognitive and aging benefits, as I mentioned, is something I've seen really benefited. Endocrine and performance applications. So as mentioned around horses, endocrine, I've had, was initially started using adaptogens a lot for supporting patients with endocrine challenges, whether hypothyroidism or Cushing's disease, and seeing how those patients were being benefited in other ways, including cognitive health and healthy aging. As well as we're looking at skin and coat support and also other microbiome benefits. So really just across organ systems and across species, we're seeing benefits. I also want to introduce, and not, kind of like get too into the minutia, but I do think it's important when we're utilizing ingredients in formulations to understand how they work. Okay, because when we have that understanding of the mechanisms of actions of these herbs, and with ashwagandha, it's very much around that adaptogenic effect. What are the primary herbal effects? What are the secondary herbal effects? How those are working, because then it allows us to more carefully and artfully formulate using that herb in part of an architecture for a bigger formula. What herbs play well with it? How can we enhance that formula with ashwagandha, but then add in other herbs that are going to work in synergy? Okay, like for example, classically is lion's mane and ashwagandha. What a wonderful combination for supporting cognitive health. So there's just a lot of cool things that we can dig into and get a little bit of a better understanding, because I think when we understand the mechanisms, then it allows us to better apply those principles when we're making formulations in the future. All right. So now I'm at the end of the talk here. I want to again thank you all for listening. I am originally from New York, so I apologize if it's a little bit quick, but it gives us plenty of time for any sort of questions, and I'm happy to answer it. I'm going to defer a lot to Bill Parker around compliance and your local compliance officers if needed, because that's definitely not in my wheelhouse. And then if there's any more technical stuff that I can't answer, I'm going to refer you to Ixoreal Biomed because they'll be there for you. But with the time change, they couldn't be here today. It'd be the middle of the night for them. So I think, there's 12.5 hour time difference. So well, I'll do the best that I can. And I can always refer back to Bill and the folks over at NASC.
Thank you, Dr. Weingardt. We appreciate
No,
the
you're so welcome.
presentation. That was great. So Bill Parker will take over now with the Q&A.
Thank you very much. Uh, Question is, where are adulterated ingredient suppliers getting the leaves from? Are they getting them from the byproducts of ashwagandha operations, or are they adulterating it in their own ashwagandha operations? How does that work?
I'm not sure. I think that it comes from it would be more about the supplier. So, and I think that may be a good question to refer over to Ixoreal, but my understanding would be that in the harvesting of the plant, you have the leaves and the root. And now if you're incorporating the leaves in with that harvest, there's going to be adulteration that way. Okay. And that could just be that they're harvesting the entire plant, right? Rather than being more specific about the root. When you look at a lot of the pictures that I shared, you can see that they're actually putting the root only into the bucket, into the bowl, and they're actually putting the leaves back into the field. So I think that's going to be utilized for composting and stuff like that. So I think it's done it could be done at a harvest level, but I think it could also be done at a manufacturing level too, where they're actually incorporating some leaves to boost the withanolide. So I don't know for sure, but if that wasn't a sufficient answer, I would reach out to either Ixoreal and then
Sure.
see if they can maybe provide a better clarity on that.
So it may just be an unintended consequence of not being diligent about their manufacturing processes then too, then.
And I think it depends on how the plants are being harvested. You can see, I mean, they're using lots of people on their hands and knees harvesting these roots by hand, right? So if you're mechanizing that process, could you feasibly have unintended consequences of the leaves finding their way into that supply of the herb?
Sure. Excellent. Thank you. Why are we not seeing U.S. growth of this herbal when the consumers are looking for USA sourcing in their supplements?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I think it would have to look at the growing conditions that are required. That could be playing into it. And I think maybe not having the technical savvy or the clinical, excuse me, the cultivation experience around it. I think it's definitely, if you could find areas within the country that are more sustained, because I think of like looking at India and the area of India where this is growing, that what sort of climate that is involved with that, because there's obviously very conducive to growth of this plant. Now, can we mimic that in the United States? I think it could be done, but you'd have to have the technical savvy and the knowledge around cultivation of this plant to do so in an organic way. That could be a limiting variable because it's just not having the wherewithal, the know-how to make it come to fruition. It could be an opportunity, though, for somebody out there who wants to produce herbs in the United States that could be done in an organic fashion. I think it would be a really interesting thing to dig into and see what that looks like.
Are there conditions in which a dog, cat, horse should not be using ashwagandha?
That's one of the things that I think is so compelling about the plant is that it has such an impressive safety profile. And that's the general rule of thumb with adaptogens, is that they're very safe and used in the longer term. Now, with that being said, I think I'm of the belief that you can't just blanket treat everything, right? So I try to look at see how a patient responds to an herbal that we're putting them on so we can assess that response. So if I'm putting a patient on ashwagandha, I'm going to monitor that patient. I'm going to see if there are any negative side effects. I don't think when we're using a root-only extract that's produced like how KSM-66 ashwagandha is, I think you have much less concerns around liver toxicity because they're not going to have the withaferrin A or the withanone that's going to create that toxicity. But anytime I have metabolic derangements in a patient, so say if their liver is challenged, I'm going to recheck them. So I may put that patient on ashwagandha, but there's going to be follow-up so that we can make sure. But as far as contraindications, right off the top of my head, I don't think of any that could be of a concern. I think there's, we see, and we'll talk about this next month because I see there to be a lot of beneficial, almost tonic type of effects where we're strengthening, but it doesn't do so in a stimulatory way. We're actually seeing almost anabolic effects building rather, and strengthening and reducing the cortisol-like effects, but we don't see a lot of insomnia or cardiac abnormalities from that tonic type of effect. So I think the way its a mechanism of action is so gentle that I think the contraindications are really pretty limited.
You touched on it in your previous answer. A question came up of, can you talk about the potential of liver toxicity a little bit further when you're using ashwagandha?
Yeah, and I think where people get a little freaked out and worried about it, if you look in the literatures, because there are some cases of liver toxicity when using ashwagandha root extracts, or excuse me, ashwagandha extracts. And I think the concern comes from if there's adulteration. Okay, so are there other things in that formulation, right? Are they using a root only extract? But if they're not using a root only extract, I think the potential for liver toxicity is greater. Okay, so if we're using a root only extract, that potential is much less. Now, we always have, having done practicing veterinary medicine for long enough, things always happen. You can't predict sometimes how things can go wrong. So that's why I think I think when you're coming at it, utilizing something that has a track record for safety, we're going to be much more confident that there's going to be less potential for liver toxicity. If we're using a product that may be a generic extract that we don't have confirmation that it's root only, your potential for liver toxicity is much higher.
Thank you. And this next question may be touching on the similar topic. The withaferrin A toxicity literature is sparse to non-existent and required very high doses. Is there data out of India, and what would we be looking for example, liver enzymes?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I thank you for making that. Is when you look at the literature, it's really high levels of the withaferrin A that's causing it. So I think there can be potential for utilizing the and I'm going to hedge myself, but there's potential for using the leaf in these extracts. But if you're testing for what the levels of withaferrin A may be in there. Now, I think this is a really good question that I'm going to have to refer back to Ixoreal to verify, because they have a lot more access to the studies around that and utilization in the human population as well, and around safety and tolerance, that type of stuff. So I think as you mentioned, that the concerns around liver toxicity were at high doses, okay, of the withaferrin A, but it also can be very contingent on patient sensitivity, because you may have patients who could be much more sensitive to those alkaloids that don't require that high a level of withaferrin A. And this is, I'm talking more about just clinical experience. But I do think it's a really good question to ask, and I don't really have a solid answer for you because we don't have the studies, like you mentioned, are sparse, and those levels were really high to produce that liver toxicity.
And that looks to be the last question. And so with that, we can.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you for your great questions. It shows you're paying attention, which I'm very, very appreciative of. And I look forward to revisiting this. So if you have more questions, reach out to me for sure, or reach out to the folks at Ixoreal, because they're very, very available.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weingardt. And on behalf of NASC, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today. And a big thank you to Dr. Weingardt for sharing this presentation with us.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.